died out with the 19th century. Well, not in the case of Whitehead. Not in the case of a lot of others as well. But this comes through very plainly. Now, let me illustrate that general tale that I've been telling. Turn, if you will, to page 18 in the book, page 18. Incidentally, he speaks in one place of Christianity as a religion in search of a metaphysics. A religion in search of a metaphysics. What he means is that the metaphysical systems which have been pressed into service are inadequate. What Christianity needs is a more adequate metaphysic. And I think that granted his conception of Christianity, which you remember is that of the Galilean peasant. Remember that phrase? It's the Galilean Jesus. Granted that conception of Christianity, he sees his metaphysic as the metaphysic for which Christian religion may be looking, you see, which may account for the process theology that has come out of it. But in any case, look at page 17. Did I say 17? Well, I'm saying 17 now anyway. Okay. About a third of the way down the page. There persists throughout the whole period, and he's talking about 16th, 17th century, the fixed scientific cosmology which presupposes the ultimate fact of an irreducible brute matter. Irreducible brute matter. That stuff, something, you know not what, okay, spread throughout space in a flux of configurations. In itself, such material is senseless, that is to say unconscious, valueless, purposeless. Okay? It just does what it does, following a fixed routine imposed by external relations which don't spring from the nature of its being. That phrase, external relations, watch. Because an external relationship between A and B, as he says, does not spring from the nature of a thing's being. In other words, they're artificial relationships imposed on A and B, incidental, which leave A and B essentially the same as they were before. The classic example of that is Descartes' mind-body relationship. So the mind is a separate entity with its own function entirely separate from, and able to function quite independently of, body with its mechanical functions. You see. So external relations. He's going to be arguing for internal relations, which obviously are the opposite of external relations. So internal relations are relationships that pertain by virtue of the essential nature of A and B. You see, A has to be defined in terms of its relationships. That's what constitutes A. You see? Yeah, what constitutes a servant, or a master, a master. You've heard of the master-servant relation, I think. You see? What constitutes a servant, or a master, but the relationship. You see. And so he's picking up on Hegel's conception of internal relationships within a process. And he's going to be, as he says, transferring that into a naturalistic context. Okay, external relations. It's this assumption of a valueless, purposeless, senseless matter following a fixed routine imposed by external relations, the mechanistic universe. It's this that I call scientific materialism. It's an assumption I'll challenge as being entirely unsuited to the scientific situation at which we've now arrived. And you find that he immediately goes on to indict Descartes. Well, turn over to page 18, and halfway through the page you have this. A little over halfway through the page. The faith in the order of nature, which has made possible the growth of science, is a particular example of a deeper faith. This faith in the order of nature cannot be justified by inductive generalization. Why not? Well, you remember Hume's problem with induction? You see? That inductive generalization beyond present experience involves the principle of causation of which we have no empirical evidence. Well, he's going to come back to that later on. He anticipates it here. That faith in the order of nature cannot be justified by any inductive generalization. It springs from direct inspection of the nature of things disclosed in our immediate present experience, concrete experience. That's where we get the idea of an order in nature. The fact that day succeeds day. That your roommate is relentlessly the same. And so forth. There's no parting from your own shadow. It's there all the time. I am I. To experience this faith is to know that in being ourselves, we are more than ourselves, to know that our experience, dim and fragmentary as it is, yet sounds the utmost depths of reality, to know that detached details, merely in order to be themselves, demand that they should find themselves in a system of things, to know that this system includes the harmony of logical rationality, the order of nature, the harmony of aesthetic achievement, there's that value achievement, to know that while the harmony of logic lies upon the universe as an iron necessity, the aesthetic harmony stands before it as a living ideal, moulding the general flux in its broken progress towards finer, subtler issues. Hey, he waxes eloquent from time to time. Indeed he does. Okay. Page 54. Flash on to that, and you get it again. Almost halfway through the page, in the context, he's talking about Newton's physics. Okay? And about Locke, who's writing with a knowledge of Newton's physics. He says, but the mind in apprehending also experiences sensations which, properly speaking, are qualities of mind only. These sensations are projected by the mind so as to clothe appropriate bodies in external nature. Secondary qualities are subjective. Okay? Thus, the bodies are perceived as with qualities which in reality don't belong to them. Qualities which are in fact purely the offspring of the mind. Thus, nature gets credit that should in truth be reserved for ourselves. Isn't that a cute way to put it? The rose gets credit for its scent, the nightingale for its song, and the sun for its radiance. But according to Locke and the Newtonian tradition, the poets are entirely mistaken. No, according to Whitehead, the poets are mistaken. They should address their lyrics to themselves and should turn them into odes of self-congratulation on the excellency of the human mind, because nature is a dull affair, soundless, scentless, colourless, merely the hurrying of material endlessly, meaninglessly. Okay. You see, he's talking here of aesthetic values. Nature is devoid of all aesthetic value if secondary qualities, the aesthetic qualities, colour, smell, sound, if aesthetic qualities are subjective, you see, then the world in itself has no aesthetic value. You see, doesn't have any colour, smell, shape. You see, and since you cook up the world of that by projecting your secondary qualities, you should congratulate the cook. Congratulate yourself. Okay. That couldn't be much more plain than that. Well, you'll see that all the way through. That sort of theme, and I'll come back to it later. Okay, in chapter 2, the chapter on mathematics, mathematics in the history of thought, he talks about the order of nature. And of course, in the Platonic and Pythagorean tradition, that was conceived to be a mathematical order, as it was in Descartes and much of modern science. That's why a theoretical physicist I got to know a few years ago did his work with the slide rule. Physics with the slide rule. Yes, because nature has a mathematical order. You see. I don't know if he does it with the slide rule now. I suspect not. He's probably dead long since. But even if he were alive, I suspect it would be some other computer than a slide rule. But this notion of a mathematical order, of course, is what in the Greek tradition underlay the theory of forms, real universals, you see. So that what you have is a notion of an eternal range of order, an eternal mathematical order, an eternal logical order. Whereas the things in this world have only vibratory existence. That's his phrase, vibratory existence. Meaning that they come and go. You see. Vibratory existence. And you can get that in various ways. You'll find him talking about it in talking of John Locke's notion of simple ideas. That is to say, atomistic ideas. So that those constituents of this so-called experience that John Locke talks about come beep, 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 disconnected, and we have to associate them with the psychological principles of association. You see. Combining and separating ideas according to their resemblance, contiguity, whatever it is. What you get is an atomistic view of experience analogous to the atomistic view of the material world in the mechanistic scheme.